Fellowship of the Broken, Making Sense of 12-Step Recovery by Angelo. Chapter 48. Al-Anon Family Groups. Al-Anon is a fellowship of support groups for families and friends of alcoholics. The Al-Anon fellowship also includes Al-Anon, which provides specific support for teenage family members and friends. The idea for Al-Anon sprung out of the early days of AA and is based on the understanding that alcoholism, and hence addiction, is a condition that impacts the whole family as well as the addict. Informal meetings started as early as 1939, but the fellowship was not officially founded until 1951. The co-founders were Ann B. and Bill Wilson's wife, Lois. Al-Anon began in 1957 as a result of teenagers seeking mutual support due to addiction within the family. Al-Anon and Al-Anon use the same 12 steps and traditions used by other 12-step fellowships. There are also family support fellowships for other addictions. These include Co-Anon, which focuses on family and friends of cocaine addicts, Gam-Anon, that offers family support for gambling addicts, Na-Anon, that focuses on families of narcotics addicts, and Families Anonymous, that covers general substance abuse within families. Again, all of these fellowships are based on 12-step recovery. These family support groups are non-interventionist. One might imagine that the purpose would be to provide family members with strategies to help the addict into recovery. But this is not the case. If an addict is powerless over addiction, then family members certainly are as well. Instead, the support groups focus on helping family and friends cope with addiction as it impacts them in the guise of the addict. I have had cause to attend Al-Anon meetings due to my own particular family circumstances. As well as finding them very helpful, they have also given me further insight into the transformational power of 12-step recovery. Some people who attend these support groups admit to being addicts themselves, as in my case, but many others do not identify themselves as such. Initially, they firmly believe that it is the addict that has the problem and is causing all of the family disruption. This is seemingly true to a large extent, but it quickly becomes apparent that not only is the family member powerless over the addiction, but that they also might be enabling or compounding the problem through their own reactions and behavior. The sharing of experience within the group is particularly important in this respect. The group is also able to provide compassionate understanding and support, but the real solution is in 12-step recovery for the family member. This may seem surprising, but actually it makes complete sense. This is perhaps best explained by taking an example and following it through to its conclusion. This example is hypothetical, but has relevance because it's not untypical. Suppose, for example, that a married couple is committed to each other and that one of them is in active addiction and becoming progressively worse. The non-addict spouse is suffering various consequences as a result of the addict's behavior and eventually decides to attend a 12-step family support group. Upon attending a few meetings, there is reassurance that others have similar problems, and there is identification with their own experiences. Others in the group seem to have found a way to cope with life despite still having an active addict in the family. The suggestion is made that the non-addict spouse get a sponsor and work through the 12-step program. This seems difficult to accept at first, but the experiences of others in the group seem to indicate that the solution works. A sponsor is selected and the work begins. The process is identical to the one that we have covered in detail. The non-addict spouse admits that they are powerless over the addict and the addiction. They come to believe that a higher power can help them to cope. They make a decision to hand over the problem to some concept of the God word. They take personal inventory and then share it. They then begin to see that it's their own personal ego self that is the cause of the suffering, rather than the behavior of anyone else. They become willing to change and start acting as if they are no longer taking things so personally. They recognize that they themselves have caused harm to others through selfish and self-centered thinking and behavior. They make amends to those they have harmed and continue to remain self-aware. They adopt spiritual practices such as meditation, yoga, prayer and self-inquiry. They awaken spiritually and begin carrying the message of recovery both inside and outside of the fellowship. They detach from the behavior of the addict spouse and start to react and behave differently themselves. They find happiness, peace, love and unity regardless of what their addict spouse may or may not do. Sometimes this has a positive impact on the addict spouse, and they may also begin to engage in 12-step recovery. Sometimes it has no impact at all on the addict, but that doesn't matter. The non-addict has found a solution to life and now relies upon moment-to-moment inner guidance rather than the old patterns of thinking, feeling and behaving. The relationship may continue or it may come to an end. There is gratitude that the relationship with the addict has led the non-addict to awaken to his or her own true nature. It is seen that suffering has resulted in transformation. Such an example may be difficult to believe, but this is generally what happens to a greater or lesser extent. In some ways, the examples of spiritual recovery within family support groups are even more compelling than the many recoveries that I've witnessed within AA. It's one thing for an alcoholic to admit defeat and submit to the 12-step process. At least an addict has the gift of desperation to spur them on. It is another thing for family members to have the humility to turn the focus away from the addict and begin to look within themselves for the solution. The fact that it works at all is a very powerful endorsement of 12-step recovery, even if the reasons are not always entirely clear to those who benefit. If we look at this example using the model of consciousness that I have described and a true understanding of 12-step recovery, then it's no surprise at all that 12-step family support groups can work so effectively. We have seen that addiction is multi-layered, but ultimately rooted in the misidentification as a personal ego self. The 12-step process digs down through these layers and addresses the core problem by shifting identity away from the personal ego self towards non-personal consciousness. In respect of this core problem, addicts are no different from any other human being. Collective and individual lack of awareness and understanding of our true nature is the cause of all human problems, of which addiction is just one example. The non-addict spouse has a big problem and is unable to solve it. The suffering caused by loving and caring about an addict in active addiction is ultimately a manifestation of the same problem that causes addiction in the first place. Both the addict and the non-addict are suffering from the same core problem, and hence they are eventually led to the same solution. The prodigal son may suffer in countless different ways, but it doesn't really matter what specifically causes him to turn around and head home. The only important thing is that the journey of transformation eventually begins. Consciousness manifests uniquely in each human being, and hence each self-awakening is also unique in both timing and particular path. Whichever way it comes about, we cannot truly experience the beauty and wonder of life and creation until this happens. The existence, growth and effectiveness of 12-step family support fellowships provide a further compelling endorsement of the powerful healing and transformative efficacy of 12-step recovery. It is a holistic solution to many forms of human suffering. It may not work in all cases, but this is only because the process is not sufficiently understood or practiced.